Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Good afternoon and happy Sunday, Nova Nation. I'm your host, Chris Notaro, and this is Villanova Tip Time, a Villanova men's basketball pregame show. We are here ahead of number 5 Villanova, going too fast, too excited for this game. We're here ahead of number 5 Villanova's matchup at the top of the hour against number 6 Purdue in the championship game of this early season tournament at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, the Cheez-It Hall of Fame tip-off tournament. That is Cheez-It as the sponsor, Hall of Fame, and tip-off tournament. I believe there is no such thing as the Cheez-It Hall of Fame. If there was, I would like to be in it. Just putting that plug in right now. After the Cats took care of business in a runaway victory over number 17 Tennessee in the early game yesterday, followed by Purdue getting by number 18 UNC in what objectively was a much more compelling basketball game to watch for the casual fan. Why? Because Coach Wright's Villanova team put on an absolute clinic against Tennessee in the earlier game, which was really only fun for us to watch. But more on that in a bit. So now today, that sets up a matchup of the number 5 team in the country against the number 6 team in the country, and it'll be Villanova's second game against the top 5-ish opponent, considering Michigan's already been knocked out of here, in just the first 2 weeks of the season. Before we get into that in a little bit, what else stands out over the last 24 hours? Well, not a ton. The games from this tournament actually led the way yesterday. There were no major top 25 upsets across the college basketball landscape. These games from the Mohegan Sun tournament did sort of lead the way. It is worth noting that the Big East had a 4-0 day yesterday overall, with not only Villanova notching the biggest win for the conference of the day, UConn also secured a blowout win, albeit against the Powder Puff opponent, and St. John's and DePaul also added wins. There was a stat floating around last night that the Big East has started the season 38-4 overall, cumulatively, with 10-plus wins already against other power conference teams. So that's just a monster start for the Big East with another signature win up for grabs today. So let's talk a little bit about yesterday. We want to just keep an eye on the clock, right? We've got about 18 minutes till game time. Like normal, I want to leave you about a minute or two to get your situation set up. You got to get flipped over to ABC, which is where you're going to find today's game. Hopefully you're in a situation where you're going to have multiple TVs. You can have Nova going on one. You can have football going on another, whether it's Red Zone or your particular team. Today is a really, really fun opportunity that, Cats fans probably only get, once or twice a year, where you sort of get the full, almost like a sports equinox, if you will, for the Villanova fan, where you've got a really hype Villanova game. You've also got other sports going on around the sports landscape. So pretty fun day ahead of us. But before we get into today, let's talk a little bit about what we saw yesterday. And I want to start with legendary writer Dana O'Neill, who wrote a piece after the game that NBA scouts were basically surprised how dominant this went. Maybe the surprise is not the right word, but just because of how loaded Tennessee's team is, that this, wasn't really a fluke, right? That this wasn't a bad Tennessee team that Villanova beat up on. I think, to use the term, it was basically like, they got some real guys there, right? So this outcome was pretty shocking. Not so much that anybody was shocked that Villanova was that good, but just that they were shocked that Tennessee got beat that bad. I think the most important point there is that our guys came in hungrier and more tenacious. Villanova basically just attituded the hell out of Tennessee yesterday. The effort and the hustle difference was really apparent from the first moment. And I think we as a fan base have become very spoiled. Maybe spoiled is not the right word, but we'll use it. Because that's what we come to expect from this team, and it really is amazing. You have to step back and appreciate. I know oh my goodness, the word culture has just been beaten to death, especially when referencing Villanova and sort of the framework and the program that Jay Wright has built. But it really is so apropos, and it really fits because in a game like yesterday where it wasn't particularly pretty from an offensive perspective, that tenacity, that effort, that hunger, that grit was just through the roof, and it really was never particularly close, the game. So like I said, it wasn't a particularly strong shooting day at 37% overall as a team from the field, 33% from three. If you told me those would be our numbers and that we'd win by 20, I would tell you that you were nuts. So I think we can all be very appreciative with the eventual outcome with those as the shooting stats. But I think, again, the headlines weren't necessarily on the offensive side. They were really more on the defensive side of the ball. I think Tennessee also just didn't have their best day, right? I think there's something to be said for that. But the defensive tenacity, also the rebounding. I think most previews of the game, myself included, were worried about what the Cats would look like on the glass, and they showed up big time. There was a significant rebounding advantage going to Tennessee, and Villanova showed up and was equal to that task, and that was not really a storyline in this game whatsoever. In fact, looked like it was really in the Cats' favor. Nobody had a monster standout on the stat sheet in yesterday's game, but I would make the argument for Jermaine Samuels first and foremost, because not only did he notch a double-double with 14 points and 11 rebounds, he just seemed like he was everywhere. And again, with just that, not only the defense being so important, but the rebounding being so important yesterday, with neither team shooting particularly well and Tennessee shooting really abysmally. Rebounding and not letting Tennessee clean up on the offensive glass was key, and it just felt like Jermaine was flying around cleaning up boards left and right. Also, have to call out the really great alley-oop that we got from Jermaine Samuels. Also, for those of you that may have noticed, you got a really great shot of Joe from Boston, friend of the program, right in the background of that alley-oop. He was sitting like 2 rows behind Dana O'Neal right under the hoop, and you saw him just sort of like, yeah, right behind Jermaine Samuels in the replay from the view from the top of the key. It was really great. I was also surprised that Tennessee did not force us to play that big size-wise. They could have made us play bigger. With the rotation that Rick Barnes was making Coach Wright go with, he didn't necessarily force that. And it was really interesting because, especially once we got into foul trouble, I feel like they really could have pressed that issue, but for whatever reason, that's not the rotation he wanted to go with. And I think that really ended up being the difference of them not being able to get back into the game with Nova holding a 20-point halftime lead. The last thing I will say is that the narrative about this game after the game is that it was a total clinic from end to end, which is probably correct. However, I think the key to that is coming out of the second half, we were pretty flat on offense, really until the under 12 TV timeout. And the difference between Tennessee getting back into this game and not was a couple of big contributions from Eric Dixon and Chris Arcidiacono. That was the difference. It was a couple of sort of lane jumpers, 10-footers from Eric Dixon, 2 of them, and then a 3 from Chris Arcidiacono. Other than that, I don't think we scored in the first 6 to 8 minutes of the second half, and it could have been panic button time with, coming out of the half with a 20-point lead. But instead, went into the under 12 TV timeout, regrouped, came out of that, banged a couple of threes, and away we went. The game was never particularly, never really in doubt after that, never really tense other than that stretch after halftime where it was like, okay, hey, don't let them back into this. And again, really just want to call out the contribution by those guys because it wasn't necessarily the big guns that you would expect. The team was experiencing foul trouble. And so you like to see that really Nova never gave Tennessee a chance to get back into this game. So now we focus on the Purdue Boilermakers, who are being called one of the most talented and versatile teams in the country. They can play fast and run it. They can slow it down and post up. They've got a dude who is 7'4". Yes, 7'4". They've got a bona fide NBA prospect in Jaden Ivey, who had a very nice game yesterday. If you did happen to catch the Purdue UNC game after our game yesterday, which I would have highly recommended because, again, just as a small tangent, not only was this sort of the premier college basketball offering of the day yesterday, this Mohegan Sun tournament, both of these games yesterday were I think Sweet 16 caliber matchups, maybe Elite 8 caliber matchups, as are the games today. So these are all games worth watching, whether or not Nova's involved in the specific game. So even the game later today between Tennessee and UNC is probably, of all the 4 games, that's probably the one that might, might swap football over to the main TV and might move that one over to the sidebar, but still a game worth watching very much. If we were worried about the tough matchup yesterday and some matchup differentials yesterday, especially in the front court, today presents sort of a next level challenge of a totally different breed. Like I said yesterday, this is going to be a narrative all year because of how, quote unquote, undersized the Villanova team is. However, what we saw yesterday was the ability to sort of kind of rise to the occasion. And what they've said all week is this is about effort, this is about preparation. We can't control, we can't add size, right? We can't just dynamically make ourselves taller. And you saw how the team was going to answer that yesterday. So that the talk track aligned with the action that we saw yesterday, but today is going to present sort of a next level challenge of a completely different nature, because Purdue has a couple of Bash brothers in number one, Travion Williams, who had a very nice day yesterday, a previous finalist for the National Center of the Year award, and then that 7'4" Zach Edey, who just eats rebounds. They're going to be the toughest front court and rebounding test for the Cats that they might see all year, and the team knows it for sure. Beyond Williams and Edey, you also have, like I mentioned earlier, Jaden Ivey. He's getting a lot of love after a very strong performance yesterday. A lot of chatter about, I think I saw a tweet, I think it was Jeff Goodman said he got a text from an NBA scout that said he hopes Jaden Ivey has his NBA draft green room suit ready, which is awesome, right? Awesome to see a guy playing at that level, to the point where he's getting that kind of talk. However, the talk is that he's not as much of a perimeter threat for Nova as much as he is an attacker of the rack. So that's going to challenge Nova's supposed lack of rim protection. And it'll be interesting with, what can Nova do to challenge Purdue's inside presence with these big dudes, with Jaden Ivey crashing the rack. And finally, the thing that Nova needs to look out for is Sasha Stefanovic, who's the guy to watch out for on the perimeter. He's the guy that you don't want to leave alone on the perimeter with all the switch-offs on defense. He's a sniper. He had a very hot day yesterday. He's the guy that can't get left alone on the switch-offs. It's as simple as that. So, as we come down to the wire here, what does Nova need to do today? I think number one, don't get killed on the boards. Simple as that. Yesterday, a really good building block to build on. Today is going to be a tougher test. But number one, most important to this game for Nova, don't get killed on the boards. Number two, like I said, make sure the switches don't leave Stefanovic as the open guy on the perimeter. Number three, like always, shoot him up, sleep in the streets. So Villanova won yesterday's game by 20, despite an uneven offensive performance. A decent day, 37% overall from the field. I think as Villanova fans, we've become spoiled. Like that's a not great day, right? It's an average day for, I think, most teams. It's a slightly above average day for quite a lot of teams, I think, unfortunately, right? My spidey senses tell me, though, that today is a game between national title contenders where the cream is going to rise to the top, and it must. So the Cats can come out on top if they not only find their stroke, but shoot a little bit more similarly to what we saw against UCLA, while maintaining the defensive and the rebounding tenacity that we saw yesterday. Sort of like putting those two hands together. So, we're like we've been doing before with Tip Time, we're kind of on the weekend schedule now, but that's good because the next game after today isn't actually until next Sunday. So we will see you next Sunday before the LaSalle game. Really, really excited to watch this Cats game against Purdue. It's a big-time national matchup. Can't say enough about the non-conference schedule that Coach Wright and the athletic directors have put together for this Villanova program. Tons and tons of reps that are going to get these guys ready for prime time down the stretch later on in the year. And like I said, really what we want at the end of the year is to see these guys, in New Orleans, clinking drinks together on Bourbon Street in New Orleans would be just sort of the dream. So I'm going to leave you a couple minutes earlier. Like I said, don't need to belabor the point. Today's a little bit shorter of an episode since I only saw you last 24 hours ago. So that's it for now. Head on over to ABC, get your favorite beverage, make sure Red Zone on your other TV. But ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time.